Hey, I'm Markia.
Want to hear something scary?
The Curse of Medusa. Magdalena was ready to take on Manhattan. She rented a tiny apartment and found a job at an ad company. She quickly became friendly with a junior executive named Paxton McNamara. Pax was very handsome, and when he offered Magdalena a tour of the city, she was thrilled. He introduced her to restaurants, the Met, and hidden parks. Eventually, he led her to his plush apartment in the East Village. All her dreams were coming true. One early Saturday morning, Magdalena made coffee in Pax's apartment as he readied for a last-minute meeting at the office. When he was out the door, Magdalena dove back under the covers instead of leaving like usual. Within minutes of falling asleep, she was startled awake and screamed. There was a woman hovering above her with jet black hair and angry eyes. "I am Adele McNamara, his wife," yelled the woman. Magdalena couldn't make sense of it. She had no idea Pax was married. "I didn't know," Magdalena cried. Adele grabbed Magdalena's hand and sliced the palm with an ebony black blade, causing Magdalena to writhe in agony. Still holding her hand tightly, Adele began to whisper something in another language, and her eyes rolled back in her head. "A lesson needs to be learned," Adele said before disappearing as Magdalena passed out. A few hours later, in a nearby coffee shop, Magdalena sat shaking, her hand wrapped in gauze. Pax walked over to meet her, knowing how much trouble he was in. The moment he laid eyes on her, he began to weep. Not from guilt, though, from the sight of Magdalena. Once mesmerized by her beauty, now when he looked at her, all he could see were dozens of writhing snakes swirling around her head. They were coming from her scalp. He tried to explain, but wouldn't make eye contact. Magdalena realized the waiter and the gentleman who entered the coffee shop had the same reaction. She was terrifying to every man in her presence. Pax apologized, and then he ran away like the coward he was. Magdalena stumbled home, heartbroken and afraid, men turning away in dread or disgust as she passed by. She reached her apartment and locked the door. Slid under the door was a notice of eviction for unpaid rent. A voicemail from work said that her affair with Paxton required her termination. Her bank account was nearly empty. For weeks, she wept in despair, knowing she'd have to leave. She'd secretly followed Pax home one evening and discovered the second apartment where he lived with Adele. With nowhere to go and little money, she grew desperate and went to see a woman named Lady Bardot who dabbled in black magics. She no longer cared for Paxton, and low-key thought having men be terrified of her made her feel safe in a way. But her chosen profession required interaction with all genders, and one day she would want to re-enter the dating scene, so this curse must end. As soon as Magdalena entered, Lady Bardot could see what all the others were seeing. The only solution, she said as she handed over a dagger, was to cut the curse off at the root. Magdalena knew exactly what to do. That night, she watched Pax enter the apartment. She snuck in after him, and as he was unlocking the door, Magdalena pushed them both into the hallway, slamming the door shut. Before Pax could react, she took the dagger out, raised it up, holding it close to her own eye. In his panic, his eyes followed the dagger and finally made him look directly at Magdalena. She stared into his soul, focusing on her hatred for him and what she had become. In that moment, she felt what they all had seen. She felt the snakes around her face, writhing and hissing at Paxton. There, right before her, Pax turned to stone and then crumbled into dust. And just like that, Magdalena felt better. She wasn't sure if it was the magic or the revenge, but he could never cause such hurt from cheating again. She closed the door and made her way home. Early next morning, there was a knock on the door. It was the landlord. Through the peephole, he said there had been an error. Not only had her rent gone through for the previous months, but he also had a bouquet of flowers from someone congratulating her on replacing Paxton as a junior ad executive. She flung open the door, forgetting her curse. She froze, but he didn't flinch. She was back to normal. However, upon taking the bouquet and reading the note attached, her face grew more and more astonished. It read, "Congrats on the new job, and thank you for taking care of that side job I gave you. It turned out better than I could have hoped. A lesson needed to be learned." The note was signed by Adele McNamara, the late Paxton's new and apparently happy widow.